Good morning. I'm just getting ready to go to my place. Oh, baby. Bathroom really bad. Bathroom. I really need to pee. Oh my gosh, I gotta pee really bad. Oh my god. Okay. Piss really bad. My pants, Jesus Christ.
Hello,
Hello.
how are you?
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning. Excuse me, please. I need to wash. Yeah.
When I arrived at the scene, I met Joyce Cohen. There were only two people in the house, according to Joyce Cohen, when this homicide occurred. Now, my teachings and my beliefs are when you have two people in a house or a room or anywhere, and one of them ends up dead, you should suspect the other person until your suspicions are relieved. And this right here? But suspicions can only take an investigator so far. And they ultimately mean nothing in a court of law. The truth is told through the evidence. Meantime, the medical examiner conducted an autopsy on Stan Cohen. He ruled gunshot as the official cause of death. He was told the victim was killed between
had no reason to question it.
Could you have a seat right here, please?
While the forensics team swarmed the Cohens' house,
Could you put your hands on the table, ma'am?
Joyce went to the police station.
Ma'am, this is,
She agreed to a routine swab test for gunpowder residue.
what I'm gonna do is swab your hand, and if there's any shot, the traces of gunshot residue.
While awaiting the results, she gave her statement. According to Joyce, she and Stan were awakened by a noise downstairs. Stan picked up his gun, and the two went to investigate. A quick search of the house showed nothing amiss. Relieved, the couple returned to bed. But Joyce claimed she couldn't sleep, so she went back downstairs. At approximately 5 a.m., a friend called from Colorado. As they were talking, she heard a noise in the kitchen. She noticed the glass in the kitchen door was broken. She said she hung up from her friend. Then she saw a figure running downstairs and out the door. She ran upstairs to check on Stan. She found him bleeding in bed. She couldn't rouse him. She dialed 911.
When I advised her that there were some inconsistencies in this particular story that she told me about the homicide, it irritated her.
She demanded that the forensics team immediately leave her house and not return without a search warrant. She said she didn't want any of her husband's things taken or touched. Detective Spear couldn't understand her hostile reaction.
Now, if a loved one of mine or anybody else that I would know was killed, I think they would cooperate 100% with the police. To me, she was not cooperating.
To Spear, it seemed she knew more than she was letting on. Until the warrant was issued, investigators were locked out of Cohen's house. 4 hours later, the paperwork came through. Joyce Cohen was presented with the warrant, and the team swung back into action. They went inside to dust for fingerprints. Joyce was called back to the police station to continue her interrogation. By now, the residue tests on her hands had come back from the lab. They were positive, showing she'd had contact with gunpowder. She calmly provided detectives with an explanation.
When she discovered her husband's body in the bed, she grabbed him and a pillow. And possibly that's what caused her to have the gunshot powder residue on her hands.
Investigators made a note of her response and pressed on. They noticed that her story changed slightly from her first interview. Now, instead of saying that her friend called from Colorado at 5 a.m., she said it was closer to 3 a.m. That left a gap of 2 hours between the time of the break-in and her call to 911. Slips like that can mean nothing, or everything. It was too early to tell. The evidence was still being gathered. Outside the house, police discovered a gun in the garden. It was taken to the Miami Police Crime Scene Investigations Unit, where it was examined by Technical Supervisor Sylvia Romans. After photographing the weapon, she tried to raise fingerprints.
Upon fuming the gun, I found some evidence of fingerprints. They weren't of much value. most significant thing that I found was that it appeared the gun had been wiped down.
Ballistics showed that it was the weapon that killed Stan Cohen. Because it was one of the victim's own guns, it seemed like a dead end. Except it bore one tiny clue. Romans found a shred of paper facial tissue caught between the frame and the grip. It suggested the gun had been wiped clean with the tissue. It also suggested another clue to look for. Samples of facial tissue were collected from around the house. In a trash can in the back bathroom down the hall from the murder scene, detectives found a soiled tissue with black residue on it. It was sent to the lab.
The lab was not able to determine whether, in fact, the tissue that was found on the gun was an exact match to the tissue that I had submitted to the lab. However, the tissue did have gunshot residue, and it also had the mucuses of Joyce Cohen.
Blood in the nasal mucus matched Joyce Cohen's blood type. It strongly suggested that Joyce had shot her husband and then wiped down the gun with this tissue. But facial tissue makes flimsy evidence.
Tonight's dinner, it's going to be great with Clubhouse.
You made 25 meals for $25.
Hey everyone, DIY on the fly.
Are you guys seeing these under-eye bags right now? No, you're not.
Do you want 10-pack abs?
Meet your dream leave-in from Monday Hair Care, a multitasking formula that prevents damage, encourages length, protects from heat, and takes risks. With keratin and hyaluronic acid for good hair every day. Available now.
To win his case, Spear needed something more substantial. What he got was a confession from someone who wasn't even a suspect. In the case against Joyce Cohen, Miami police were hampered by lack of solid evidence. But 1 month after Stan Cohen was murdered, the investigation took an unexpected turn. A career burglar named Frank Maglione was arrested for a separate crime. He knew about the Cohen murder and wanted to strike a deal.
We learned that he and 2 other companions assisted in this homicide and were paid to do this homicide by Stanley Cohen's wife, Joyce Cohen.
Maglione knew things that only someone involved could have known. So it was clear he was telling the truth. But even this startling confession didn't assure Joyce Cohen's conviction. On the stand, it would come down to the words of a grieving widow versus the testimony of a career criminal. Feeling he didn't have enough evidence to get a conviction, Spear spent 2 years chasing the other men Maglione implicated. But they wouldn't crack. He had to rely solely on Maglione and the forensic evidence to prove Joyce Cohen's involvement. According to Maglione, Joyce met him and the others at a restaurant to plan the hit. Joyce had it all mapped out. It was supposed to look like a burglary gone bad. They were to arrive at the house between 2 and 3 a.m. and use Stan's own gun to kill him. Maglione's story had one nagging inconsistency: the time of the hit. Phone records showed that Joyce called 911 after 5 a.m., not 3 a.m. They also showed that her friends called from Colorado shortly before the 911 call, around 5. It didn't make sense for Joyce to wait 2 hours to call police. Yet 3 a.m. is also the time Joyce gave in her second statement. What seemed like a possible slip of the tongue suddenly became pivotal to the case. what sounded like gunshots. He recalled looking at the clock. It was around 3 a.m. The information supported Spears' theory, but even this report was nothing more than circumstantial. To truly determine the time of death, he needed the testimony of the victim, Stanley Cohen. Originally, the medical examiner had no reason to doubt the time of death according to Joyce Cohen, and listed it at 5:30. Now, determining the time of death was more tricky. The body had long since been buried. All that remained were photos taken upon its arrival at the medical examiner's office. Hours after death, blood settles in the lowest portions of the body in a process called lividity. The cooling blood creates telltale red marks. From the extent of the lividity marks, a medical examiner can estimate the time of death.
7 by 5 centimeters.
Joyce Cohen's lawyers hired an expert witness who requested copies of the autopsy photos. He determined there was no lividity when the pictures were taken, meaning the victim was killed shortly after 5 a.m., as Joyce originally asserted. But because the defense was viewing second-generation reprints of the photos, the subtleties of the images were lost. Testifying for the prosecution, the medical examiner went back to his original photographs. The lividity was apparent, meaning the victim was killed around 3 a.m. Joyce had waited 2 hours to call the police, proving she was part of the conspiracy to kill her husband. Maglione's testimony put into question the time of death. The autopsy photos confirmed his story. The forensics work on the scrap of facial tissue further proved Joyce Cohen's connection to her husband's murder. At the prearranged time, Maglione and his team arrived at Cohen's house. She was awake and let them in. They already knew where to find Stanley's gun. They went to the bedroom, shot him 4 times, then ran out. On the way, they dropped the gun. Joyce picked it up, wiped it down with the tissue, and threw it out the window into the garden. She then perhaps blew her nose on the tissue and disposed of it in the far bathroom. Although it was never proven, she may have arranged with her friends in Colorado to call her, thereby establishing her alibi. Unfortunately, the friends called too late, or there was some confusion over the time zones, Colorado being 2 hours earlier than Florida. Her own alibi betrayed her. Joyce Cohen received 40 years for murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Frank Maglione received 10 years. The co-conspirators were also rounded up and received sentences of no less than 39 years. Murderers are optimists, always believing they can get away with it. But reality has a way of catching up with them, one fact at a time. On a sleepy Saturday morning in August 1988, a driver on a rural road outside of Oklahoma City was startled by the sight of a burning truck. He got out to take a better look. Curiosity turned to horror when he saw the body of a man lying on the driver's side of the cab, his leg dangling out of the open door. After the fire said that she'd last seen her husband at dinner the night before. It was just like any other evening. After the meal, he went off to work.
Oh, cool. Gonna take some to work.
He mentioned nothing about having to stay late.
Every day, you go about your business, take care of your family, live your life, until one day and a moment when you need a nurse. At NCSBN, your moment is our mission. We protect the public and the trust in nursing through policy, data, and innovation. We work every day for your one day. See how we make your moment